Hi, Opal. Any ideas about what we should do for our geography project?
Hi, Perry. Yes, I'd like to do something on wetlands.
I think that's a great idea. Where do we start?
With a definition, of course. Something like a marshy area of land where the soil near the surface is saturated or covered with water, forming a special habitat for wildlife.
And we could add, the flora and fauna of the area are reliant on the waterlogged soil for their survival.
Yes, that's a major problem, actually. When commercial developers or farmers come along and decide to drain the swamps, everything dies. The practice is all too common, unfortunately. Did you know that as a result, wetlands are recognized internationally as one of the most threatened types of habitat?
That's right. We'll have to be sure to discuss their importance in our assignment.
But first, I think we should state some of the particular characteristics of wetlands.
Well, there are 3 that I can think of. To start with, wetlands are limited areas of open water, which vary depending on seasonal fluctuations.
Yes, and the second could be that there's usually a variety of water-tolerant flora on the banks and throughout the water.
Of course, depending on the time of year, there may be more or less water, but levels generally remain quite shallow.
Okay, now let's move on to the importance of wetlands.
Shall we start with plant and wildlife habitat?
Yes, I think we should point out that wetlands are homes for countless species of water birds, frogs, invertebrates, and fish.
And they support many varieties of water-loving plants.
Which brings us naturally to the topic of biodiversity. Even small wetlands act as borders between land and permanent water. They turn into refuge areas or sanctuaries in times of drought, and they often support rare and threatened plants and animals found nowhere else.
Exactly. And they're especially important as nurseries and breeding grounds for all kinds of fish, birds, and invertebrates.
Wetlands are important for improving the purity of the water, too.
Yes, that's because the flow of water through the wetlands is slowed by bank and in-stream plants, and so it allows sediment to settle. Nutrients such as nitrogen and phosphorus and other pollutants are removed as the water passes through.
Okay, at this point, I think we should look at mangroves. They're important for nutrient removal.
I think nutrient recycling is more accurate, and biological productivity, because wetlands are really very productive ecosystems.
Should we do a food web then?
We should do a diagram of some sort showing the importance of mangrove trees, but maybe not a food chain.
How about you explain it while I try and sketch it?
Right. Well, let's start with the mangrove trees. They're very special because of their aerial roots that allow them to breathe even when the tide is high and their roots are underwater. They can live in salt water, and the salt enters through the roots, travels up to the older leaves, and then these die and drop back into the water. A unique feature of mangroves is their ability to develop leaves on their seeds while they're still on the tree, and the seedlings drop down, planting themselves directly into the mud underneath.
Got that. What happens to those older leaves that fall?
The fallen leaves, or litter, decay in the water and form a rich mud that feeds bacteria, worms, and small crustaceans.
You mean things like prawns and crabs feed on the decomposed leaf?
Yes, and even little fish do as well.
And bigger fish feed on them?
Eventually, the remaining organic matter, which is now just very tiny particles, is taken up through the root system, providing nourishment for the mangrove trees.
And the cycle begins all over again.
Yes, that's exactly it. That's what we'll call it, the nutrient cycle of mangrove litter.
Great. I'll go home and work on this, and we'll meet again tomorrow.
Okay, see you then.